Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Roto NBA Daily Fantasy Show here for April 1st, 2021. No jokes on today's show, just getting down to business, Pacheco. We did get some big injury news early. Zion out for the New Orleans Pelicans. Brandon Ingram doubtful. I'm taking that as he's not playing. This just seems like a pretty key spot for them to rest their dudes. Lonzo not playing, so their rotation is going to be down to their guards that that get minutes is Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Josh Hart, Eric Bledsoe, Kira Lewis Jr. Sindarius Thornwell has gotten some mop up. He's been on 10-day contracts for them. Their forward rotation, the aforementioned Josh Hart, James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, and then some dudes who have not played. Wenyen Gabriel, Najee Marshall. This is where it gets weird to me. What do you do in this spot? What are we expecting the range of outcomes for Steven Adams to be? Do we think that with no Zion center minutes, Adams has a 32-minute ceiling here? Or do you think they pretty much keep their center rotation roughly the same?
Well, the big things with the Pelicans is that they play tomorrow. And so I'm assuming that we're getting all these dudes out tonight because they're gonna be playing the regular rotation tomorrow unless Zion is really hurt, Brandon Ingram is really hurt. But it seems to me like they should be back tomorrow, outside of something significant holding them back. To your question on Steven Adams, I still think you see, the regular 28, 30 out of them in what should be a competitive game. It's the Pelicans against the Orlando Magic. I mean, and the Pelicans have no one. So
yeah,
it should be competitive. And as long as you see that, you probably see 28 to 30 out of Adams, and then you get Jackson Hayes as the backup center. But maybe that's just one of the weird things you do tonight, Davis, in terms of getting ahead on other people, because now everyone's going to know, who's in, who's out for the Pelicans. And the news got in too early, which is something I was complaining to you about before the show started. And so now, all the optos and all the projection systems are going to catch up to all of this. So playing someone like Jackson Hayes, upping him a little bit in hopes that Adams is a little bit limited tonight is not the worst thing to do in this slate.
Yeah. All right. And then the other big injury for this slate, Paul George not playing for the Los Angeles Clippers. And you know what? Actually, we can just cover that when we get to that game, because I don't think we have any other big question. I guess Bradley Beal is the questionable that we're waiting on, but my analysis there is Westbrook stone cold lock. He's stone cold lock if Beal is out. Still probably one of the best plays of the slate, regardless. But then Kyrie Irving, the lock of locks. James Harden not playing, Kevin Durant not playing. They play the Charlotte Hornets. On DraftKings, we have Kyrie projected as a 23.6% chance of making the optimal lineup, 1.47 fantasy points per minute. If I was MMEing tonight, which I'm not, I'm only playing single entry, but I would consider locking Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense, but the Pels value, does that not scare you? Or is that just you're just going to play Kyrie and all the Pels value regardless?
So that you do make an interesting point, which is that all of the good Pels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Josh Hart, and Kira Lewis Jr., who I'll look here real quick. I don't know how good he is projecting in our stuff, but yeah, so he's projecting pretty strong. So all those guys take up guard slots. You can't play Josh Hart at small forward, obviously, but Kyrie is, I think, a decent favorite to be the highest scoring player of the slate if Beal plays. Now, Beal plays, I feel different. Or if Beal doesn't play, I would not do that, because then you're talking about limiting Pell's value and limiting your exposure to Russell Westbrook. But, Kyrie, with what are his rates going to be here? I mean, this is going to be one of his highest usage games of the season. He's gotten very few spots to play without Durant and to play without Harden.
Yeah, it's only happened once in a game against Utah, but the challenge with that one and looking at it to like trying to get too much out of it is that Karis LeVert was with the team back in those days, and Karis LeVert is no longer with this team, and so it should be one of the higher rates games that we see out of Kyrie all season. You could argue that some of our inputs are low, but granted, they're the highest they've been on our projections. So it's a really tough one to handle, but I do think that banking on Kyrie on being a top 3 scorer in the slate it seems to be a lock. It has to be a lock on essentially all projection systems.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead game by game. First game, Washington at Detroit. Very hard to say anything definitive here. We are projecting Beal to be in. Mm-hmm. I mean, if Beal's out, Westbrook, it just feels like he's just going to get 65. It just feels like he can go crazy. The prices for some of the secondary guys are up a little bit. Jerome Robinson to 3,500 from 3,000. Denny Avdija up to 4,000 from 3,500. I am less. I mean, honestly, these guys are so bad, and Westbrook ends so many of the possessions. I'm out on these guys. You really need someone like Jerome Robinson to be like 3,200, 3,100 to really want to jam them. I guess. I mean, Hachimura is seeing his price increase, and that sticker shock is going to keep people off him a little bit. He actually scored 30 the other night with only 4 rebounds and 3 assists. So and he is a guy who can generate stocks, rebounds, assists. So I think maybe he gets a little bit under-owned here if Beal doesn't play. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Rui is just going to be more valuable if Beal's out, right? His rates are going to jump up a little bit more, especially the usage. Beal plays, it is tough to justify essentially any other wizard outside of Westbrook. I simply just don't know how you play them in the slate. I know Alex Len is really cheap on FanDuel, has a really small probability.
I don't even care, man. He's so
I know.
useless.
Has a really small probability of landing in the optimal, though. And so, like you really could just, if Beal plays, you could just consider Westbrook and Beal and not consider another wizard.
Yeah. So Detroit is fairly interesting because their guard rotation is such a mess.
Yeah.
So we are projecting – well, right now we are projecting Dennis Smith Jr. in. He's questionable. He might be on a minutes limit if he plays. But basically the way it's shaking out is they're just playing a bunch of dudes 24 minutes a night. I believe that – didn't Josh Jackson get a DNP CD the other day and then he started the next game? I'm pretty sure that happened, or did I make that up?
No, that's accurate.
Yeah. So these guys – I mean, even if Dennis Smith Jr. is out, Hamidou Diallo is out already. But I mean, literally, even if Wayne Ellington is out as well, none of these guys really interest me. I mean, maybe Saban Lee a little bit because he's the one guy who can kind of get there in like 26, 27, 28 minutes. But but that's it for MME. I mean, the rest of these guys just seem so useless. And then, I don't know, Jeremy Grant. What you like Jeremy Grant?
I don't know, man. I don't think I'm gonna do it on DraftKings. I would do it on FanDuel because he's 6,600, and that's an enticing tag. But I think everyone's gonna do it on FanDuel. He's coming off a good performance now, and it's a good matchup against Washington too. Is the other thing. Washington just bleeds points to opponents. Like they just can't stop anybody. Nor do they have any interest in stopping anyone is the thing.
Right.
But Grant, for me, coming off a really good game, his minutes, I've mentioned the thing on his minutes. It's still a thing. He's really not playing 35 plus anymore. It's a second night of a back-to-back. This, to me, just seems like such an obvious fade spot for the Pistons outside of it being a really good matchup and their team total being a little bit inflated given the matchup. But I can't really click on these guards, especially if Dennis Smith really does play, I think that takes Saban Lee out of the equation entirely. You still have Corey Joseph in this rotation who they're going to give minutes to. And so it's too many guys for me, Davis. I just can't click on these names.
Yeah. All right. Philadelphia versus Cleveland. We have, still no Joel Embiid, getting about a 25-minute projection on Dwight Howard. Ben Simmons in this matchup. Now, the problem here is this is a 10-point spread. Philadelphia is a lot better than Cleveland. Simmons is just always interesting to me, especially on FanDuel because of his stock upside. But he's been pretty bad for like the last week. So your minute watchers, your game log surfers are not going to be clicking on Simmons. But you don't really have to go that big in his logs or that far back in his logs to see, triple doubles, really solid games. He would be a guy that if I was MMing again, which tonight I'm not, I'm exhausted. Opening day, it's been a thing. Simmons is a guy I would feel comfortable upping the volatility on a little bit because, you're just not going to find him. Like the Cavaliers, they turn the ball over, they miss a ton of shots. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for him to rack up the secondary stuff. I'm not really that interested in Tobias Harris, just given the context of the slate. I'd rather, use punt spots at forward or, just find other ways to spend that salary. Does anyone on the Philadelphia side interest you?
Well, Tobias on FanDuel is 33% optimal.
Oh, there we go.
So, that's looking really, really intriguing over there. He's 8,300, so even cheaper than on DK at 8,700. His usage rate has been phenomenal without Embiid in the lineup. So I still think he's in play in this one here. Simmons is also 7,900 on FanDuel, Davis, compared to 8,900 on DK.
Stock duel, baby.
On Stocks Duel. So in Cleveland, it's just have you watched a Cleveland game this year? I bet you probably haven't, right? I bet you probably
You know what? That's so funny you say that. I literally don't think I have. Maybe, you know what? Yeah. I remember flipping on one night, finding a stream when Damian Dotson was like the only active guard they had. Because I just wanted to see what I just literally wanted to see what he looked like because I had no clue. But so right now the Cavaliers are down Jarrett Allen. They're down Larry Nance. Kevin Love is questionable, hasn't played since March 14th. Maybe he plays. If Kevin Love does play, guys like Dean Wade, Chetty are completely unplayable. Dean Wade maybe a little bit playable, 34, 31 minutes the last two nights. The guy who is interesting to me for Cleveland, though, Pacheco, is Isaiah Hartenstein, who must just be a terrible NBA player because every team that gets him cuts him loose. But he is always good fantasy points per minute. Like literally always. Yeah. He has always been good fantasy points per minute. Played 26 minutes against Utah in a giant blowout loss. 14 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 points, and 5 fouls in 26 minutes. If he starts and Kevin Love is out, I think he is pretty playable personally.
Yeah, even with Kevin Love in there, he's certainly not going to play more than like 15 to 20 minutes. There's just no way that he plays that much. And so I still think we get Isaiah starting in this one, and it's possible that even if Dean Wade doesn't end up starting, he'll play backup center, backup forward. He'll get minutes in this one. But you're right on Isaiah. He's really the value on the Cleveland side as a center that can do a little bit of everything. He's not good at particularly anything, but can do a little bit of everything. And last game he played 26 and a half minutes or so, and he was like in horrible foul trouble. The game was a horrible blowout from the first quarter on. So there's a chance if he starts, we could actually be low on his minutes relative to what I saw last game. But the foul trouble thing for him is a thing. He does it very often, so it's hard to keep upping him on the minute side when you know that risk is kind of always there for him. But he's really the one Cavalier that you should have interest on tonight. Outside of that, Colin Sexton, a little bit too pricey for me. Darius Garland is okay on FanDuel, not really on DraftKings. Dean Wade, maybe on FanDuel. I'm not interested on DraftKings. This Cleveland team's really bad. They're really messy. That should be really good for Ben Simmons and the Philly guys. I think this spot for Dwight Howard does scream upside to me, but I don't know if he's going to start. He's been not very great here.
He just doesn't have the minute ceiling. Like they're not going to give him 32 minutes. It's just not going to happen. And so if guys can't get over that 28-minute mark, it's very hard to get 40. Like it's just extremely hard to get 40. Like he would have to double and get 4 blocks basically.
Yeah, 40 is tough. I mean, 40 is going to be tough for him. But this spot might be a Mike Scott starting spot as well. But regardless, I think Howard has done bad enough lately, right? That game log watchers are just not going to be really interested there. And this matchup against Cleveland is a pretty good one. So maybe this is the game that Dwight can put it together.
Yeah. All right. Charlotte against Brooklyn. Gordon Hayward is a really good play tonight, and he will be a little bit more interesting to the game watchers, I think, because he had the 51-point game, but he was playing huge minutes in the non-LaMelo games. Now they are also maybe down Devonta Graham or Malik Monk rather. He is questionable for this game, and that doesn't matter for Hayward's minutes that much, but it definitely matters for his usage. But I mean, he showed against the Wizards exactly why our projections were loving him even when the results weren't there. 39 minutes in a competitive game, 19 shot attempts, 11 rebounds, 6 assists. I mean, he is of the 7 to 8K tier, that mid tier. I think he has real ceiling that a lot of these other options do not.
Yeah, you really do have to like him in this matchup against Brooklyn here. And you're right on the minutes. The rates have been a little bit better too without LaMelo for sure. There's a lot to like there. He's going to get ownership though, especially on FanDuel. He's going to get owned. 7K, small forward eligible. No shot he doesn't get owned over there. It's on, if you really don't want to get it owned, it's going to be on DraftKings because he's nearly 8K over there. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, PJ Washington was a huge letdown last game. Cody Zeller played a lot of minutes. They essentially played a near full 48 between Zeller and Biyombo at center. And if that's the case, Washington's he's just going to get dusted because he's not going to get any small ball center minutes. And that's part of his projection, right? So it's the risk that he carries in his profile, but he's 5,500 again on FanDuel. I think that's a really good tag. I think you just on DraftKings at 6,300, that seems like such a fadeable PJ Washington tag. But the FanDuel one, it makes it a challenge, Davis, because it is a really good one for him. Same with Terry Rozier. 75 on FanDuel looks good. 8K on DraftKings, it's starting to get pricey.
Yeah. So on the Brooklyn side, already talked about how much I love Kyrie Irving, specifically if Bradley Beal plays. I mean, I just think so we have him projected for a 34% usage rate, basically a 34% assist rate, 36.5 minutes. I mean, he is a stone cold jam. Always love playing Bruce Brown in these situations, either when it's Kyrie out and Harden's playing, or Harden out, Kyrie playing. Joe Harris also, I think I think your projection is right, but I think his usage rate could just end up being a little bit low in the flow of the game. We saw him have Joe Harris had a huge game last night. I mean, basically, just if Joe Harris is playing well, Joe Harris is hot, they let him get the shots up. 17 shots last night against Houston, 39 DK points, 28 real points. I mean, that's always the thing with Joe Harris is he's not getting you any stock action, not assisting, very unlikely to get 10 rebounds. So it literally is just points. Are we interested in any other of the Brooklyn guys? Jeff Green, Bruce Brown, Nick Claxton?
So, by the way, you're right on the Joe Harris usage. What's happening here is no Harden, no Durant. It's scaling for essentially everybody, and Joe is one of the guys that is catching some of that. But it's points for him. He's not going to do much else, even in an offense that now doesn't have James Harden. All the ball handling is just going to go to Kyrie, and Bruce Brown, I think, can do a fair share of that. Which I am interested in Bruce Brown in this one. Brooklyn's going to need a new starter because they're going to start Kyrie, Joe Harris, Bruce Brown for sure. They should start DeAndre against Biyombo, but DeAndre doesn't play minutes anymore. And then we need a fourth, which is probably going to be it could be Jeff Green, it could be TLC, or they could just go really small and play someone like Tyler Johnson. Though I doubt that one. I think it's probably going to be like one of TLC or Jeff Green or something like that. And then we're going to have to adjust that because we're waiting to confirm the starters for this one. So maybe TLC with a minutes projection in the 20s would become a little bit more interesting.
God, he does nothing though. He really does nothing.
I know. Right now, you just can't really consider him. And if he's coming off the bench, it's really tough to consider. As you mentioned, he just doesn't do much. So you really need the minutes. I'm interested in Bruce Brown. Lots of interest on Kyrie, as you've already noted. One of the better plays on the entire slate. There's really no debate about that. And then Joe Harris, too pricey for me.
What's he at on FanDuel?
He's 48 on FanDuel. Yeah. FanDuel, it just always seems like everyone is a little bit mispriced, right? On FanDuel, like most of the time. Not really on DraftKings.
Yeah.
By the way, the other thing I wanted to mention real quick on Brooklyn is no Blake Griffin tonight for them, but LaMarcus Aldridge is ready
to be active.
Make their debut. Yep.
What do you think there's any chance that Aldridge starts?
If he starts, it's going to be over DeAndre Jordan. I can't imagine he plays at the 4. Though, I could certainly be wrong, but I can't imagine that. So if he started, it would probably be over DeAndre.
They do that, though, right? They move Jeff Green over him sometimes, too. So it's not like it would be,
No, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing. I would be more surprised if it was like LaMarcus starting next to Jordan. I don't think that's going to happen. And LaMarcus is really cheap on FanDuel.
He's 4,000.
And he's 4K on DraftKings. So maybe if LaMarcus started and we got a good report on his minutes, like he's no minutes limit or anything like that, I think that one could be kind of interesting in this slate.
Yeah. Okay. Golden State against Miami. Curry back. He's like the top leverage play of the slate. We have him on DK. About 18% to be in the optimal, about 10% owned, projected for 35 minutes, 31% usage rate, 33% assist rate. It really just is a thing. Like, people forget how good he is. Curry could straight up outscore Kyrie, even with the insane Kyrie projection. The one field play I have for the Warriors is going to be Wiseman at 5,200 on DraftKings at center. They'll need him tonight against Adebayo because Pascal is not playing. They definitely are not playing Smailagic. They probably don't want a ton of Draymond against Bam, I would imagine. Maybe 5 minutes, 8 minutes of that, but that's not what they want. They would rather have Draymond guard Jimmy. I would assume that would be their preferred matchup. I don't know. What maybe Wiggins on Jimmy? I don't know. Draymond's getting a little slower. All of the point here being we have Wiseman for 28 minutes, but pretty anemic rates relative to what I think he can do. Because I just think Wiseman's good. Just like long term, I think that Wiseman will be better than he has played thus far, and I think he's got some minutes upside tonight. So I like Wiseman.
We have a near on our back end. We have a near 25% usage rate on the guy, Davis.
I meant like rebound rate, blocks, steals, things like that. I think the usage rate looks fine. I'm talking like I just think he can be a better activity guy in general. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's just based off of opinions of like him being a really high overall pick, really high like 5-star recruit and all that stuff. And he has not done a ton at the NBA level. He's had a couple he's had a couple of these games where you're like, oh, Wiseman, he can get after it. But I mean, he hasn't been over 30 points since the 4th of March.
Yeah, this is tough because honestly, the what should happen is Draymond on Bam. That's really what they should do. Wiseman against Bam, that seems tough. That seems really tough. But you're probably right in that they do need him tonight. They probably will match him up against Bam, and I don't think that's a good spot for Golden State at all. The challenge with Curry in this slate is just that he's an awesome leverage play for sure. He can outscore Kyrie for sure, and you essentially need him to, right? But there's so much guard value. It's not just Kyrie; it's also the Pelican guys that we mentioned earlier. They all those guys are like guard eligible in this slate. So I think that's really tough on Steph, but he can land on the optimal lineup for sure. He has too much rates upside, and the actual points scored upside is through the roof with this guy if he gets hot. So I do like that call. Wiseman, I'm not really onto on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he always shows up as a play, but I've mentioned that he really doesn't have much of a ceiling beyond what we're projecting on the median side. And on FanDuel, you really need centers to do a lot.
Yeah.
So that one kind of turns me off from a tournament perspective. I think if you wanted to play him in cash, it's fine. He has a pretty narrow range of outcomes.
Yeah. All right. Looking on the Miami side, do we have a Q tag on Nunn? Yeah, we have him projected basically to not play tonight.
So it's the thing with Nunn is that Depot is going to play tonight for Miami, and we don't think that Nunn is a thing anymore. He's just probably going to get out of the rotation because they now have Hero and Dragic and Jimmy and Oladipo. There's no minutes available for Kendrick Nunn anymore. And Depot, we have to confirm that he's going to start. He's going to start for Miami at some point. It could very well be tonight. And if that's the case, then yeah, Nunn is dusted.
Yeah. I mean, no one from Miami looks particularly. Bam, I think, has probably more ceiling than he'll be owned. Jimmy seems fine, but like at 9,000, I just like, so sure you play a little bit of him in MME or whatever because he's one of the guys who can get 50. But in single entry or 3 max, are you wanting to play Jimmy over even Kawhi? Are you wanting to play him over Curry?
Mm-hmm.
Are you wanting to play him or even Capella? Right? I don't know. I don't really see it. He seems pretty average to me.
No, so a couple challenges for Jimmy tonight. Back in a back-to-back, which it's not that it's affecting the projection per se, but it's the back end of a back-to-back regardless, and Oladipo playing and potentially starting. That's just going to throw all the rates. It's just going to be a mess. And it's not just going to be for Jimmy. It's gonna be an adjustment period, I think, for this entire Heat team because Oladipo does have like real rates, like a big usage.
Literally, as we are recording right now, Dragic ruled out.
So that could be a little bit better for Jimmy's rates, but I'm not.
I don't think it matters. Yeah, like looking, that just means that Nunn comes back in the rotation. Yeah. Maybe it makes Oladipo except he's left at his Houston price. If Depot and Hierro were the same price, but yeah, no, I just saw that Depot is 7,500. So Dragic is out, but it doesn't really mean anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nunn gets back in the rotation, and then Depot, look, if he's ready to play like 33, 34 minutes right out of the gate, then he's certainly gonna project better than he is right now, but. Now he's coming into a team that he's not the number one, right? I mean, you have to battle out Bam and Jimmy for all these rates, and Jimmy just doesn't let go of a lot of these rates. But I do think that Oladipo in here is certainly going to impact both Jimmy, Bam, Hero. It's going to impact the entire team. So I'm not really into Jimmy at a price tag that it's just too high right now.
Yeah. All right. So there we go. Through that game. Orlando, New Orleans. We already covered the New Orleans side pretty good. Literally on DraftKings, not one New Orleans player showing as a value. They are playing a 5-guard rotation now. Ross, MCW, Bacon, Hampton, and Randall. They're playing they're playing so many guys at forward. Okeke, Otto Porter Jr., James Ennis, Dwayne Bacon, Kem Birch. These guys are all low fantasy points per minute guys anyway. So then when you start segmenting them out, I mean, it's just I can't even come up with an argument for anyone in GPP as a bring back. I guess Ross, if you think he can play like 35 minutes, but I don't. This is not a spot where I'm trying to force in bring backs.
Yeah, no. Ross isn't starting. Not that he was going to, but we didn't even see him play like really significant minutes off the bench in his game back there very recently, and he's 7,100 on DK, which to me that is just not playable in this slate. I wanted Michael Carter Williams, everyone's darling, to be a little bit cheaper, but he's nearly 6K. His rates without Aaron Gordon and all these guys in there, they're pretty good, but he's overpriced on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think you can give him a shot at 5,300. Okeke is one of the forwards that has taken a next step in terms of usage on this Orlando team, but now he's 5,700. I remember the good old days where you could play Okeke for 3,500. 57 is just it's unplayable. There's no one playable on DraftKings on the Orlando side. I think Michael Carter Williams on FanDuel is playable, and there's no one else that I would consider on the Orlando side at all.
Yeah. All right. On the Pelicans side, on DraftKings, we have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Josh Hart, Eric Bledsoe, Kira Lewis, and James Johnson, all his values. I'm assuming that this projection, Pacheco, is assuming that James Johnson enters into the starting lineup for Zion and that Josh Hart starts for Brandon Ingram.
Yes, that's correct. Josh Hart should be in the starting. I can't imagine him not being in the starting lineup tonight without Brandon Ingram in there. And Hart is a guy that they just let him play all the minutes he can handle. He should be leading this team in minutes tonight. Feel very confident about that. What I don't feel very confident about is the Jimmy Johns thing, simply because he hasn't played with the Pelicans yet. He's been with the team because he got traded, but he hasn't played with the team yet. Wundu has, but he's not really a 4. Though I technically they could play him there against Orlando, but they might want a little bit more size against Okeke. So it should be Jimmy Johns, but they also have Najee Marshall, Wendell Gabriel, like these randoms that it does scare me because those guys have been with the team. They have been playing like random minutes here and there. So it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world to see them start over Jimmy Johns, but they are not fantasy relevant. Who you really want starting from this team is James Johnson. His rates historically have been pretty good for a forward. Earlier in his career, he used to do the stock thing a little bit more. Now he's older, but he can still kind of get there. He's really cheap is the other thing. He's been priced on both sides. And so if he were to start, I think he'd be really interesting. If he doesn't start, I would still risk him in GPPs in the hopes that he can still get 20-plus minutes. And his ownership is just not there. But if he starts, he's going to be mega owned tonight.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, generally speaking, he does well. I guess your possible leverage plays here would be Kira Lewis Jr. There's not a chance in single entry and 3 max that Eric Bledsoe gets owned in our ownership projection. Not a chance. People are not clicking on that dude's name. There's too much negative energy associated with 2021 Eric Bledsoe. So if you hate the ownership projection, I guarantee you it's a little bit too high. Like I would swap Josh Hart and Eric Bledsoe's ownership projections. We have on DK Bledsoe at 47%, Hart at 30%. Swap those around.
I think that's fair. And remember, the algo is really not going to know about the game log watchers, right?
Yeah.
And their tendencies in that way. All it's knowing it's that the projection is it's kind of massive for Eric Bledsoe, and so I'm pretty comfortable with the projection because I know that some of these rates are going to return to what they were over the last few seasons. This is just not a situation that we've seen all year, right? Zion has been out. Brandon Ingram hasn't missed a game. Lonzo has been out for a good bit, but we haven't seen all of these dudes out in one game. So I do feel confident about Bledsoe's rates. He has looked really dusted this season. He just doesn't look the same, and it certainly could be because of the age and the miles he has at the NBA level. So certainly some uncertainty on that projection. You mentioned Kyle Lewis Jr. I think he's still going to get owned, but probably not going to be massively owned. The play here is the play that no one can see right now is probably Jackson Hayes over Steven Adams, right? Just kind of hoping that the Adams takes a backseat tonight, that they take it easy on him on the first night of a back-to-back, and they somehow play more Hayes. I think that could be somewhat interesting because Hayes is really cheap. But on FanDuel, I don't think you're doing that, Davis, because you can only play one center. I think I'm more into that on DraftKings. I don't know if you have a take there, but I think that one is semi-interesting.
Yeah. All right. I think we got a question about Hernan Gomez for the Pelicans. Yep. I mean, is he even going to play? Do they play him at power forward at all, or just backup center?
No, he gets backup center. He gets backup center run. He's not going to play out the 4. I mean, unless Steven Adams just doesn't play, then you do have a chance of getting.
Got to be a chance that happens, right?
Has to be a chance. They haven't mentioned anything about it though. But they could do without Adams tonight. They have Hernan Gomez healthy, and they have Jackson Hayes available, so they could just split the center minutes between those two guys. But if Steven Adams is starting, I don't think you can do the Hernan Gomez thing because it's probably going to be Hayes backing him up, and I really doubt that they're going to play Willie at the 4. But if he started at the 4 over Jimmy Johns or someone else, then yeah, there's your biggest tell, right? That they're willing to do that, but they haven't been willing to do it this year.
Yeah. Okay. Atlanta against San Antonio. San Antonio ruled some guys out. They ruled out Lonnie Walker and Keita Bates-Diop, who wasn't even really in the rotation anyway, and then Trey Lyles as well. So they're down to just Jakob Poeltl and Drew Eubanks in the front court. I mean, if Clint Capella is eating their lunch, Poeltl could see, I don't know, what is the max minutes Poeltl could see?
He could play you. He could do 34, 35. I think he'd do 34, 35.
He'd be at 5,900. He would be pretty solid there. I'm not really that interested in Dejounte Murray or DeMar DeRozan because they cannibalize each other's ceilings so much, and neither of them are big secondary points guys. Like, neither of them are big rebounders, stealers, blockers. But the Atlanta side, every time John Collins doesn't play, I mean, one, I think that Capella is just a total smash. But doesn't it feel like without his usage in there, one of Gallinari or Bogdanovich or Hunter, one of those guys I feel like should rate as a value, but then it never happens because they just play Tony Snell like 32 minutes instead. So boring.
Yeah, it's boring. It's certainly very boring that Tony Snell is playing such a big role on this team. I wish those minutes went to a more exciting DFS play because Snell is just not it. We'll see because Collins out means they need a starter, and so I am wondering if they're going to give Gallinari a shot at the 4 or if they're just going to insert DeAndre Hunter back in the starting lineup without Collins around. They could do either or. They're going to have to do one of those things tonight. I think Hunter is questionable though. He's not. Yeah, Hunter is still questionable. So if he were to be ruled out, I think them having to play Gallo at the 4 and probably going to have to play 30-plus minutes would rate better on our projections than it is right now, certainly. But you're right on Capella. No John Collins here to snipe away center minutes. It should just be him tonight. Maybe they throw Gallo some backup center minutes, but I think it's the Capella show in this one. and the price tags just kind of weren't ready for more minutes. So you should be comfortable firing away here.
Yeah. Anyone else from Atlanta? I mean, Trae Young, 11% projected ownership. Again, another guy, especially without John Collins, who can, beat Kyrie. Probably not beat Russ, but I mean, certainly he's got a 60-pointer in his range of outcomes.
He does. Hasn't really done it as often this year. Atlanta's playing at a putrid, just horrible pace. They've been one of the slowest paced teams since Nate McMillan has taken over for this team. In fact, I think they've been the slowest paced team in the league with McMillan under the helm. So that's just not great for fantasy. It's certainly not great for Young. Could he get there on points and assists? Absolutely, but he doesn't do enough stocks. He doesn't rebound because he's a really short dude. So I personally, I would rather do Curry over Trae Young.
Yeah,
in
cool.
single entry 3 max if you were to do that.
Yeah. All right, our final game, 1.5 point spread, Denver against the Clippers. No Paul George for the Clippers. Can't stop, won't stop. Terrence Mann for me. Guy's just been crushing it. The projections don't like him as much as I do. Marcus Morris is questionable. If he doesn't play, Batum, Kennard, and we're not going to know. I think he probably will play, but it does seem like a legitimate questionable.
Yeah, it does. He has a calf. He has a calf issue that has been bothering him. So. That Q tag does look real. It's not that they're trying to rest him, in my opinion. Man, so how much do you like Man over the projections? Because I think the projections are kind of good on him for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not questioning. I'm not questioning your rates. I just think he just is. He just does a little bit of everything, right? Like he will probably score 14 points. He will probably get 5 rebounds. Mm-hmm. Obviously a lot of variables with assists. He's not a big stocks guy. Maybe you give him 2 stocks, but also he's shown more minute ceiling. He's gotten up to 34. He's gotten into the mid 30s. And if Reggie Jackson is just playing like trash, which by the way, Reggie Jackson, my guy, but he can play very bad sometimes. And this is also a super important game for seeding. Mm-hmm. So we're getting now to the part of the season where in the really important games, no Paul George, I mean, they might run, the Clippers might run a guard rotation of Reggie, Man, Kennard, and that's it. Those might be the only guards they sub in. Probably no minutes for Amir Coffey, who played 20 minutes against Orlando, 14 minutes against Milwaukee. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he got 1 rotation in each half, right? So he gets his, 4-minute rotation in the first quarter and in the third quarter, and that's it. And we see really high minutes for Man, Reggie Jackson, Kennard, depending on Marcus Morris himself. Also, would not surprise me to see 36, 37, 38 minutes from Kawhi here, because this is a game that if they lose, it actually matters if they lose this game.
Yeah, I don't know what DraftKings has Coffey as. Do they really have Coffey as a point guard, shooting guard eligible guy? He's not even a guard.
They have this point. I literally don't know anything about this dude.
Dude, that's really funny. He's not really a guard. I'll tell you that much. He's more of a forward.
Yeah, just a wing player.
He's a wing. He's certainly not a point guard, shooting guard. I think you made a lot of really good points. No Paul George is obviously massive for rates here, right? That's why Kawhi has the rates that he has. Marcus Morris has an elevated usage without Paul George in the lineup. Reggie Jackson, his rates have been on the rise without Paul George in the lineup too. Same with Terrence Mann. They've really done a great job at not only giving this guy minutes, but really developing him. He's been pretty darn great for them this year. I think he could certainly get into 34, 35-minute range in that scenario that you mentioned. Reggie Jackson's just not playing well. We saw very recently Jackson just not getting the fourth quarter rotation, and it went to Man. So I think Man's minutes in general are just a little bit more secure. They really do like him. Kennard, he's cheap on DraftKings at 4,200. I think it's interesting. The thing with Kennard is if he doesn't have his shot falling, it's kind of like Reggie Jackson, right? And even worse because he can't really do much of anything else. So that one to me is like if the shot's going in, I think he could land on a tournament winning scenario. If it's not going in, you're not going to get him into a tournament winning scenario. So it's like a Joe Harris. If he has it going, I think he has a good night. If he doesn't, he's going to be completely irrelevant. I think Kawhi in this spot is going to be owned on FanDuel for sure. Small forward eligible, 9,600, no Paul George. That's going to get owned probably 40-50%. DraftKings, though, Davis, doesn't look that way. 18% ownership going for him at 9,300. So he looks like a pretty sneaky play over on DraftKings.
There we go. I mean, how interested are you in Kawhi relative to Kyrie, relative to Curry, relative to Russell Westbrook, relative to Nikola Jokic?
That's a tough one. Given the ownership that I'm seeing on Curry and Kawhi, if I just had to like take one straight up, it's going to be Curry for me. Kyrie is just at a different level tonight. I can't pick Kawhi over Kyrie. Jokic. So on the Denver side, by the way, it's not that we just spoke about that side, but Aaron Gordon is obviously a part of this team now. Has been starting. Hasn't gotten the fourth quarter rotation, so he hasn't gotten the big minutes yet. But at some point, it's coming. It has messed up Jokic's rates a little bit, not significant enough, but at least a little bit. Where now he's not projecting for like 60 plus. He's at like mid 50s, which I think is appropriate. But I could see a world where Kawhi just beats him outright tonight. Russ, if he doesn't have Beal, you can't put Kawhi on that same tier. If Russ does have Beal, I think they're kind of similar. To be honest, like Westbrook is he could do 45 to 55 ish with Beal in there. That's probably around his floor. Without Beal, it's a 60 plus, unless it's a blowout.
Yeah, which is the Beal news pretty important for this slate. First game, so we'll know. But obviously, you just can't set anything to stone until we get there. On Denver, I mean, so we have Jokic for 14% projected ownership, 22% optimal. He actually might be. No, Curry and Trey are the best because they're direct leverage off of Westbrook and Kyrie. But Jokic will be, I think that's actually probably a little bit high for him in terms of projected ownership, just because I do think so many people one thing that's hard with basketball projections is to catch that Westbrook is actually going to be owned in like 85% of lineups, right?
Yeah.
So which cuts down from how many people are gonna actually play Jokic. So he's good there. I don't want no one else from here. Seems Michael Porter Jr. in MME. That's about it for me though.
So if Beal is out of the slate, it almost becomes too straightforward, right? In terms of like, I think with Beal in there, it makes Russ he's a play, but he's not a must. He's not a must with Beal in there. There's no way. Right now we have him with higher ownership than Jokic and Kawhi and Steph and some of those guys. And granted, some of that is positional stuff, but he's not. It's without Beal that he becomes like, it feels like a must own. But if that's the case, this slate becomes almost so straightforward, right? You can play Westbrook, you can play Kyrie, some of the New Orleans value. And I don't know. I'm almost hoping for Beal to play. Because in that way, if Westbrook gets his 80, if he just still goes bananas, it's not going to be at 80% owned.
Yeah.
It'll be in the 20s. If Beal is out, he's going to be the 80%, I think, that you called. 75-80 just looks so obvious here for him. even with Kyrie value, even with the Pelicans value, everyone's going to know that you have to play Westbrook at this point without Beal.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that about wraps us up. I think we covered everything. We're waiting to hear on Beal. I guess we probably want. We definitely want Pelican starters. We definitely want to know who for sure is starting in Atlanta in place of John Collins. But that about wraps us up.
Same with Brooklyn, by the way. We need confirmed Brooklyn starters to see who's starting for James Harden, and then on the Cleveland side, we need to know if Love is playing. If he is, if he's gonna start. Are they gonna still start Isaiah Hartenstein in that situation? Those are some of the questionables on that side.
There we go. All right, everyone. We will be back tomorrow. See you then.